Welcome everybody to today's webinar. Today's topic is Medisoft data cleanup. So we're going to get into that. Before we get started, I just want to introduce us. So my name is Natasha. I'm one of the trainers here at AsComp Technologies. I've been here for a little over 10 years now. And we also have with us today Tony. And he's been with us, what, 16 years now, Tony?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. It's so good to be here. There's got quite a few attending this webinar, so that's exciting.
Thank you all for joining today. So let's get started. So what is bad data? So bad data is going to be data that is duplicate data, which I'm sure a lot of you using Medisoft have come across, like duplicate charts, duplicate insurances. I'm sure that's a huge one we get calls about all the time. Missing data, so like when there's empty fields that should have been populated but was not populated. Inaccurate data, that's, like codes that were keyed in that don't even exist, and incorrect data. So that's what is considered bad data. So when we're talking about the data cleanup, it's not working on aging. Some people get that confused with cleaning up their numbers, but doing the suggestions that we're making today, the tools that we're going to give you today, that will also make your reports more accurate. So that's going to be our next list here. Why do you need to do a data cleanup? Well, for one thing, it can clean up a lot of space on your computer and in your Medisoft. So all of that data does take up space. It can slow down your Medisoft. It can slow down your computer. Also, you want to prevent data corruption. So if you have things that are missing from spaces, old data that's in there that's not converted correctly, lots of things like that can cause data corruption. It will also enhance your performance when you do a data cleanup. And again, it's going to improve your reporting. It's going to make your numbers more accurate. Like your patient count. If you have multiple charts, that can throw off your patient count. So a lot of these things will definitely help improve your reporting. All right. So the data cleanup tools that we are going to show you today are going to be reports. I'm going to show you some reports that we suggest that you run to find data that's inaccurate. The write-off utility. This write-off utility is going to help you to do a bad debt write-off to get all of those old balances updated and zeroed out, so that when you run your reports, it's not including your old balances that you have considered a write-off. And Tony's going to show you the file maintenance, how to run the file maintenance program. And that's going to help you clean up your data too and get rid of things that have deleted that you tried to delete, but it didn't actually fully delete in the tables, in the data tables. So it's still kind of hanging out there, even though you can't see it in your Medisoft. So that's going to help you to free up some space. And also in the file maintenance, it will recalculate your balances. And also he's going to show you how to purge old data as well. So we'll get into all of that. And then the last thing we're going to show you today is the duplicate chart cleanup. So we'll show you that tool and how to get rid of duplicate charts. And we're also going to show you how to prevent duplicate charts by changing. So if a client changes their last name, we get that question a lot. If a client changes their last name, some companies just create a second chart for that. But then that patient has two different charts, and you don't want to count them as two different patients, and everything should be all together on one chart. So Tony's going to show you how to change the chart number so that you don't have two charts for one patient. So we'll get into that.
Natasha,
as well.
I got to say real quick here, that image that you have on the bottom right corner, bad data quality may result in frustration and lead to drop kick in your computer. I think that is so fitting. That's so funny, because we want everybody to just focus on the things that you guys are good at, your billing, being able to work with your patients, and just leave this other stuff without it getting in the way. because that's what can happen. You're running into performance issues, error messages, all these things, and now it's just delaying all those things that you're able to work on. That's just going to disrupt your workflow. So don't kick your computer. Just do these tools, and you'll be good.
Right. Yes, we want to help you to get your Medisoft running smoothly so that you can definitely focus on the patients more than your computer. Exactly. Thank you, Tony. All right. And then the last thing we did add on the list was a list cleanup, just to kind of show you how to inactivate items on your list, on your codes, like inactivating duplicate insurance companies, duplicate charts, cases, things like that. Let's get started. I'm going to share my Medisoft with you. Give me just one moment here. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to show you are the reports that we recommend that you run for your data cleanup. So you're going to go to the reports menu, and you're going to go down to the very bottom to your Medisoft reports. This is going to open up your reports module. And for those of you who have never been in this reports module before, this is a great tool where you're going to be able to access all of the additional reports in Medisoft besides the ones that are on this list at the top. So there's a total of, last time I counted, 315 reports in Medisoft. So there's bound to be some in here that you definitely will want to use. So I'm going to go ahead and mine's minimized here at the bottom. So the reports are all separated by these folders here on the left. So the folder we're going to go into today is the data analysis folder. But if you're looking, this is just a tip for those of you who haven't been in this screen before. If you're looking for a particular report, you can just type in a keyword here at the top. So for example, like patient aging is a popular one. Type in a keyword and hit the Find Now button, and it'll give you a list of all those reports matching that keyword. And you can also, any of your favorite reports, you can also add them to your favorites list. So the one that we're going to run today is going to be data analysis. And then on the right, these are all of the different data analysis reports. Now this gives a breakdown of each of the reports that you can use to clean up your Medisoft, but there's actually a bonus report at the very bottom where this one report is actually going to run and pull a list of all of these 15 things here that you'll need to clean up your Medisoft. So for example, the number 14 that I have highlighted, birth dates in the future. That's definitely something that you want to, correct in your data. Transactions with future dates, that's a big one there. There's always going to be some data entry errors in any data set. Unapplied amounts, this is a great one. So you can pull that list of unapplied payments that haven't been applied that need to be. Charges that are missing diagnosis codes. Transactions by non-existent providers. And now in the newer versions of Medisoft, it will not allow you to enter a provider code on a charge line if the code doesn't exist in Medisoft, but in older versions it did. So this one's gonna apply more to people with older versions of Medisoft. And same thing with this one, transactions that use non-existent procedure codes. In the newer version, you can't type something in that doesn't exist in the list of existing procedure codes. But in the older versions, you were allowed. So this is going to help clean up anyone who has upgraded from older versions of Medisoft as well. Null amounts in the comments. This is if you're using a comment code and an amount was typed in there. And then transactions without any info. Claims that only have a comment. This is a really good one to use. I do get questions a lot about why do I see a claim on the claim management screen, but when I go to transmit that claim in revenue management, it's not there and it doesn't go anywhere. And that's because it's a claim where the charges were removed, but it still has a comment on it. And some of the comments would be something like where when you send a claim out and your Medisoft makes a comment in the patient's account automatically that says the claim was sent or that a statement was sent. Those comments are listed attached to a claim number when you have charges, when you initially create your claim. And if you delete those charges, those comments still exist and they're still connected to that claim. So those will still show up in your claim management screen. And I can show you an example of that in just a moment. Transactions that have claims, or excuse me, transactions that have no claims and should have. So this will pull any charges that are sitting out there where there's no claim number, they weren't created and placed on a claim. And then claims that have no transactions. Again, this will show you all the ones with empty claims where sometimes you'll create a claim and then somebody will go in and delete those charges. Well, that's going to remove them from the claims as well. And then those claims will be empty. Claims without status. This one applies to the older versions of Medisoft. This is going to show you claims that don't have a status like sent, ready to send, done, rejected. It just doesn't have a status. In the newer version, it won't even allow you to do that. But again, in the older versions, it did. So claims without methods. This is referring to the method that you're sending the claim with, whether it's paper or electronic. And then patient and insured relationship. This is going to show if there is the relationship is missing. And then the case insured number 1, 2, and 3 does not exist. That's talking about the insurance code. And I've actually seen this one before with people that have data that have upgraded to newer versions. In an older version, it allowed you to type in the case, the insurance code, even if it didn't exist in a list. So for example, like if it was Cigna and your code is CIG00, but somebody accidentally typed in CIG00 instead, then that insurance code doesn't actually exist. So that claim wouldn't ever go anywhere because there's nowhere to send it. So that's a good catch there. Case guarantors who do not exist. Again, this is one where in the older versions, it would allow you to type in the guarantor's chart. And even if people would, do a typo and it would put one in that didn't even exist. So that's going to catch those errors as well. Cases with insured guarantors with no insurance. So this is going to pull the cases where there's an insured person set up, but there's actually no insurance. So, and then cases with insurances, no insured guarantors. So this would be one where there is an insurance, but it doesn't show who the insured guarantor is or who the insured policyholder is. And then cases without sequenced insurances. So this is one where it's going to show you if there is a primary and a policy number 1 and a policy number 3, but there's no policy number 2. So of course, you're going to have to populate policy 1 and then policy 2. You can't just skip policy 2. So this will catch those ones. Or if there's no primary and somebody put a secondary and a tertiary policy in there. So skipping policy 1, which I have seen that several times before. So instead of running these individually, I prefer to just run the very one at the very bottom that says data analysis. And this is going to capture all 15 of those all in one report. If you want to add this report to your favorites list, all you need to do is right click on it and select add to favorites from the drop-down menu. And that will place it in your favorites, which is located here right in the top middle of the screen. So next time you come to this screen, you don't have to go looking for it. You'll just click your favorites button there. And here is my new favorite report. And you can add several reports in this favorite screen, as many as you'd like, actually. If you're running it from your favorites, all you have to do is click preview report in the top right-hand corner. Otherwise, if you're running it from here, you'll just double click on it. Oops. And that will run it. So on this first screen here, and it doesn't ask you for date ranges or any ranges like that, because again, it's just going to search your whole data set for any of these items on the list. So this first page is giving you an explanation of all the things that it's checking for. And then at the very top left corner, you can click on the arrow pointing to the right to get to the next page. And this is what has come up for my data. So my data set's very small, so there's not very much. I mean, hopefully there's not very much in yours either, but mine is small. So I have some cases without sequenced insurances. So if I go to this chart, just to show you an example really quick, AUSAN. And it's giving me that pop-up here. The case has no primary insurance. Let's go to this other one. So here's one of them that, actually this one's missing both of them. Yeah, that one's missing all three. And this is one where I have Aetna set up as a primary policy. There's no secondary, but then I have Blue Cross Blue Shield as the third policy. So let's skip the secondary. So that's where it's catching that error. So those are nice little cleanup things that I would then have, my biller go in and move that policy 3 over to policy 2. Of course, you want to confirm that that is the secondary and that I'm not totally just missing a secondary insurance. All right. Okay, so that is the cleanup tool. Let me go back to that report and just close out of these. Close. Oh, it's not letting me close without. Let me turn that off really quick. This is our data, our tutorial data, so it's not completely set up. So it's forcing me, it's trying to tell me, force me to apply this payment down here that's unapplied, which that will also show up on that report as well. All right, so that's that report. So we also have on my data, it caught cases with insured guarantors, but no insurance listed. So here's one that I've got. It gives you the case number, all the information you're going to need to locate that information and correct it in your Medisoft. And then here's my unapplied amount. So this is the chart that I just had up for number 13, the unapplied amounts. For this, that was the same chart. When I was closing that account, it was telling me I needed to apply these payments. So it also caught it on this report as well. And then I have one with the birth date in the future in 2036. It hasn't been born yet. So that's a good catch because it would, those claims would get denied, of course, when you send those to the insurance company. So it's good to catch it beforehand. All right, so that's the data cleanup report. The next tool I want to show you is the write-off utility. That is located.
Would you recommend that customers probably do this after they convert their practice? Maybe just run some of those reports, see if there's something they might catch, because it could show on electronic claims too, or rejections if some of this stuff is missing.
Yes, absolutely. I would highly recommend if you upgrade or do any sort of conversion. Absolutely. I'd also recommend doing it like on a quarterly basis, just so that report doesn't get too lengthy to do your cleanup. A quarterly basis would be great for that report. Yes, good question, Tony. Thank you. The next tool I'm going to show you is the write-off utility, and that is located under the tools menu. And you're going to go to the very bottom of the list to services. And you're going to get a little drop down to the right. You're going to select the write-off utility. And not to be confused with in the older versions of Medisoft. So this is Medisoft version 25, which 26 will be released soon. But version 25, in the newer versions, which this is 25, you have this write-off utility located here. In the older versions, it was under the activities menu, and it was called the small balance write-off. This one is not necessarily for small balance write-off. You can write off any balance with this one. And it works a little differently than the small balance write-off utility, if any of you have used that one in the past or previous versions. So this write-off utility, the first thing you're going to do in the top left corner is type in a cutoff date. So the cutoff date means it's going to pull a list of charges or credits that they have on their account that are anything that basically doesn't have a zero balance. Any transaction line in the transaction screen on any of the accounts that do not have a $0 balance is what it's going to pull in the screen here. The cutoff date means on or before that date. So if I put in December 31st of 2019, it's going to pull all the charges on or before this date, nothing after this date. Because of course, we don't want it to clean up stuff that you just keyed in last week or last month. So just make sure to put your cutoff date in here for anything on or before. The next field you have is the case billing code. This gives you a drop down if you are using case billing codes. Some of you are not. The case billing codes are basically where you can put your cases in certain categories. So for example, I have one for cash patient. If I wanted to only do this write-off utility for my cash patients, and I'm using this case billing code for cash patient, that is only going to pull my charts. Let me show you if I go to one here. It's only going to pull charges linked to a case where under the account tab, and it's located right in the middle here, where my case billing code has that particular case code. So if this one had cash, it would include charges for this patient. So that's where you can assign that case billing code. That's also a great way to put your patients or different cases and charges in different categories for reporting too. This case billing code is used on several reports in Medisoft as well. So for example, if you wanted to run a report for just your cash patients or just your personal injury patients or patients with a certain insurance, you can use that case billing code for that. If you leave it empty, it's going to include all cases, all charges. It's going to include all patients. Of course, on or before this date. And then the next field to the right is transaction balance not to exceed. This is where you can put a cutoff amount. So for example, if I put transaction balance not to exceed $100, it is not going to pull any charges that are greater than $100. So $100 or less, as far as the charge goes, the balance on each charge. And again, this is going to be a transaction balance. This is not the entire balance for the entire patient chart. So if the patient's chart, they owe $500, but each of their transactions are $50 or less, it's not going to include, or excuse me, I would say $100 or more, it's not going to include those. Only for the charge line balance is basically what this is. And if you leave it empty, it'll pull everything, whether it's $1 or $1,000. And then underneath that, for transaction credit balance, this is referring to if the patient has a credit on their account. Because again, we're looking at old transactions that are almost 2 years old now. And so it's going to pull any of those that still have a credit balance that's lingering out there. So sometimes you'll have, a patient that has like a $10 balance and they've never used it, or maybe you need a list of those so you can send them a refund, or whatever the case may be. It's going to pull those credit balances. Also, this is a really great tool to balance out the accounts where maybe one of their cases or one of their charge lines has a $10 credit, but the other one has a balance. So it's going to write off both of those, leaving that account with a $0 balance, because it's going to adjust the credit line to make that credit. If it's a negative $10, it's going to add an adjustment of a positive $10 to reverse that credit. And then it's also going to reverse that charge line that's $10 to a, it's going to do an adjustment and add a negative 10 to balance that out. So then you wouldn't have to go in and move that credit from one line to another. So it's going to do that for you. It's a great tool to balance those out as well. And by doing this, again, what this is going to do is it's going to make your reports more accurate, so you can see what the current AR is, as opposed to old, outdated aging that's sitting out there that you cannot really collect on, especially if it's old claims. So I'm going to hit the refresh button. So I'm going to leave both of mine empty because I don't want to limit it to any balances. So I'm going to leave it empty. You're going to hit the refresh button once you're done deciding what your filters are going to be, or your parameters. And so here's my list. On the far left-hand column, you'll notice in the post column, all of the boxes are checked. What I prefer and recommend is to uncheck all. There's an uncheck all button. We'll check all, and then you can uncheck it and say uncheck all. And it's going to uncheck all those boxes there. So then you can go through and decide which ones you want to write off. Because most likely you're not going to just write everything off. You can, but most people prefer to kind of go through and see what they are. So in the second column, it's going to give you the date from. That is the date of service for each of those transactions. And then it's going to give you the chart number, the patient's last name and then first name, the case number for each one. So you can see if these charges are all on the same case or not. And then responsible. This one is a really great column to look at. And you can even drag and drop these columns in a different order if you'd like to, if you prefer. You can just click on it, hold your cursor down and move it somewhere else if you'd like to. But the responsible column, that one's very important because it's going to show who's responsible for that balance. So you can see here that Medicare on this one that's highlighted is responsible for the $60 balance. And then the next column over is going to show you the last payment date. So on these ones, you can see there was no payment date on those. But then if we jump down to this one for Jay Brimley, you can see that Cigna, the Cigna one did have a payment. And then so that way you can go in and look at that case and determine, okay, what's going on with this? Because if Cigna paid, then maybe we should just send the remaining balance over to the patient, send a statement out to that patient. So it gives you an opportunity to decide which ones you want to write off and which ones you want to leave on here to look at. And then it gives you the procedure code. So again, you can move this over to the balance, next to the balance column, if you kind of know what your fee schedules are, so you can see, how much is actually left from that procedure code. And then the last column is the procedure description. And that's the end of those columns there. Let me see if there's any additional columns we can add. So these are the additional columns that you can add to the screen. You have claim number, document number, entry number, statement number, and transaction type. Statement number is a good one to add because then you can see what statement was actually sent out. If it was one that the patient is responsible for, you can see if a statement was added or sent out, previously. So you can see on a lot of these, there's a 0 statement number, and some of them there is a statement number. So I can see that statements were sent out for some of these. To add that column, you're going to click the little black dot in the top left corner, and it's going to give you your list of columns that are currently on the screen. You're just going to click the Add Fields button in the bottom left of the small screen. And then these are the additional columns that are left to add. You'll just highlight the one you want to add and click OK. And it's going to add it to your list, and then click the second OK button to get back to your screen. So once you go through and decide which ones you want to go ahead and adjust off, and I don't have any, I do have one on mine. So here's one on mine. I have a $200, if you look in the balance column, a $200 credit. So that might be one that I will probably want to go in and look at and not write off to see why there's a $200 credit sitting on that account. You can also sort by the balance column, so you can make sure that you don't grab the ones with the credits if you want to go ahead and take a look at those first. So you can do that. If you want to, you can also sort by the chart number. So I like to sort by chart number as well, so I can see for the same patient how many credit or what the balances are, and if they have so many different balances here, I might want to, figure out what's going on with this, especially if they're for the same insurance company, and see why those are still sitting out there and they weren't paid. But again, since these are old ones from almost 2 years ago, those are most likely not going to get paid if you haven't, they haven't been paid yet. But what you could do is just make sure there's somebody just didn't post the payments. So you may want to look those up in your clearinghouse to see if you did receive those EOBs, to go ahead and get those payments posted and balanced out on that account. So I'm just going to select some of these in here by clicking the box in the far left column. And then before writing them off, you're going to go to the bottom of the screen. On the bottom left-hand side of the screen, you have a credit reversal code you're going to need to select, so it knows what So it knows what code to put on the account, because what it's going to do is it's going to add a line item to your transaction entry account. And I created a code for this, and I just called it CRED for credit reversal write-off. So CRED, REV is the one that I created. Of course, you can name yours differently. This list of codes pull from your Medisoft under list and procedure payment adjustment codes. So if you don't already have a credit reversal write-off code in your list, you can go here to your list menu, credit, and then go to procedure payment adjustment codes. In the bottom left corner, all you have to do is click the new button and you'll create your code. So in my example, I did CRED, REV, short for credit reversal adjustment. And then you're going to change that to say adjustment. It's not insurance adjustment, because the insurance is not adjusting these off. These are not from an EOB. This is you doing an internal write-off or adjustment. So you're going to want to make sure to select this code type of adjustment. And then also, if it is a credit reversal, you're going to uncheck that box so that it doesn't make it a negative amount, because a negative amount is just going to put more credit onto the account, right? So you want to uncheck the box for the credit reversal so that it puts a positive amount on the account, because if there's a credit on the account already, it's going to say, like the one I showed you for $200, it says negative $200. So to bring that to a $0 balance, it would need to be a positive amount you're adding back on the account to adjust it back down to a $0 balance. And then just the opposite for your other code. So this one's already on my list, so I'm not going to save it because I've already got it there. But the other code that I created for this, I just did a bad debt write-off. So that one's going to be, you're going to make sure that one has that box checked, which is defaulted already for a negative adjustment amount. So I'm just going to do my bad debt write-off. And then the next field over is the write-off description. This is the description that's going to show up in the transaction entry screen on the bottom half of the section where all of your payments and adjustments are listed. So it's going to use, if it's a credit being reversed, it's going to use this code, and it's going to say adjustment made by write-off. If it is a balance that's being adjusted off, it's going to use this code, and it's going to have the same description in that line. You can always change this if you want to put the date in there, so you know exactly when you did this write-off. It's going to use today's date in the first column though. But if you want to make a note, any sort of special, like you can even change this to say bad debt, adjustment made by bad debt write-off, or whatever you'd like in this box. You can just type in the description you prefer. But you just want to make sure it's something that you know, if you go back and look at that patient's account later on, that you'll know what this is, what this line item, where it came from, and why it was adjusted off. And then, of course, before you do anything in your Medisoft like this, where you're adjusting multiple line items off using any sort of utility, you always, always, always want to make a backup of your data. And Tony's going to be showing you how to do that next before you do the file maintenance, because that's, again, something that you always want to do a backup before you do any sort of cleanup in your Medisoft. So I'll let him show you that part. I'm going to hit the print button here in the bottom middle of the screen. That is going to generate a report so that you can have a list of what you're writing off before you actually do it. And also it gives you a nice little overview so you can see if you pulled something in there you didn't need to pull in there. And at the bottom of the report, it gives you a grand total. So it's showing me today I'm going to be writing off $261 worth of balances, and I'm going to be writing off $35 worth of credits. And I can see I have two small credits here, one for $10, one for $25. And so you can print this report out. It does have the date in the top middle of the report for reference purposes in the future. If you want to print this out to PDF, you can do that as well. When you go to print it out, you're just going to want to make sure to switch your printer to PDF, so mine's already defaulted to PDF, so I can just click OK and save it, or change the file type. So I'm going to just close that out. So I don't need to save this report right now. And then, so that report's also good. So if you want to make any changes, you can. You'll notice the report only included the line items that I have a check box for. It did not include all of these others. That $200 credit that I pointed out earlier, that was not on that list because the box is unchecked in the first column. And then the last step to write it off is to just click the write off button. Again, bottom middle of the screen, you're gonna click write off. And then here, again, here's your pop-up saying it's strongly recommended to make a backup before you run this, but I already have a backup of this, so I'm just gonna go ahead and hit yes to continue. And then you'll notice those line items that I selected at the top of the list are gone. They have disappeared from the list. So this gives me a chance if I want to keep going and continue to select some more to write off, I can. And then the next time after I click write off, those 4 I just selected will disappear from the list as well. But I'm not going to do any more for now. So I'm just going to hit the close button in the bottom middle of the screen. And I'm going to go ahead and pull up one of those accounts that was on the list to show you what it looks like. And it was this case. So here at the bottom, you can see today's date, 9/16/2021. And here are the line items that were written off for that patient. So here's the $60 adjustment, a $2 adjustment, a $17 adjustment, and a $12 adjustment. And here's my description that it placed on all 4 of those line items. So I know exactly what it was. I used the write-off utility to make these adjustments for bad debt, old bad debt. And if we look at the top half of the screen, let me just move some of these columns over. On the top middle of the screen, you can already see here that it says the balance is 0 for this case. And now the account total for all cases for this patient has a $0 balance. So his account has been cleaned up. There's no balance left on it. For those of you that like to see the remainder column on this transaction entry screen, so you could see which line items are now $0 balance, you can add that by clicking this black dot again in the top left of the screen. This little black dot is where you can add and remove columns throughout almost all of your screens within Medisoft. Anywhere where there's a grid, you can add and remove columns. So I'm just going to add that remainder balance so you can see all of those line items that have a remainder balance. And I'm also just going to remove these NDC columns here that I'm just going to get those out of the way. All right. So now you can see that remainder balance column, and all of my line items on this case are now a $0 balance for these old charges from 2009. So that account is cleaned up. All right. So that is it from me right now. So I'm going to let Tony jump on, and he's going to show you how to do the file maintenance.
Yeah, thank you, Natasha. That was very informative. If we were in person here and we're doing this training in front of all of you, I would probably ask for a show of hands of how many of you have seen an access violation error or some random error pop up in the program, or experience some slowness as you're opening up a certain window, like transaction entry, claim management. Just, you notice a difference from when you first started using Medisoft. We probably get quite a few hands go up, and that's because I've seen that happen in our support department. So one of the most common errors we see is access violation errors, other types of errors that have to do with different tables that just don't make any sense, and they just keep popping up quite a bit. So file maintenance is a great utility that can help with that and might be able to clear up some of those things that you may have not even come across. So just so you can kind of imagine this a little bit. If you were to, I just want to share a quick story here. My wife and I recently went to Costco, and as you know, if you know Costco, there's a lot of groceries you can get there. So we tried putting everything in the fridge, or at least I did, and I couldn't get it all in there. So my wife comes over and she's like, I got this. And within just a few minutes, not only did she have enough room for everything, but there was even extra space for even more things. So if you can imagine that, that's kind of like what file maintenance does. It's going to clear up quite a bit of the data entry that you're trying to get into the program. It's not going to free up computer space, but it's just going to make it easier for you to manage things, move things around within the program. The way you do that, like Natasha said, the first thing you want to do whenever you run any of these utilities is to do a backup of your program. Let me show you here how we get started with that. So you can do a quick backup right to your desktop computer just by going to File, Backup, and then Backup Data. It's going to ask you if all users have exited the program. So if you have a network version of Medisoft, you want to make sure that everybody in the office has logged out of the program. And then click OK to this window. It's going to bring up where you want to back it up to. If you just want to do a quick backup, you can just go right to your desktop, select desktop, and create it right there. So like Natasha said, we already have a backup, so we're going to go right into the file maintenance utility. We access that by going to File, moment here. There you go. It looks like we need to do file maintenance. There's an error that can pop up as well. Right, Natasha? We see these random times, even as we're working, doing trainings. So let's do that. File maintenance.
Perfect example of why you need to make
backups. There you go. We couldn't have planned this any perfect than that. So let's go here and open this up. You're going to see all the different tabs. It might seem a little overwhelming when you see this. What do I check on? So let me explain what each one of these does. So rebuild indexes. This is like reorganizing things, putting things back to where they need to be. This is all happening behind the scenes. So as you're entering in data, deleting data, things get kind of jumbled up a little bit inside of your database. So rebuild indexes helps to clear that up. This other tab called pack data, this is like if you have a trash can and there's just so much, it's just stuffed all the way to the top. Do you ever like just push it down with something to try to give you a little bit more space? That's a little bit of what pack data does and how that works. So what we recommend doing, and as well as recalculate balances, this is the one that's going to help you, or with all the different accounts, if you see certain balances that they're just not adding up right, your charges, your payments, your adjustments, and the balance just doesn't look right. This can help with that. It can clear that up. It's going to go through every single patient account and recalculate their balances. So the simplest way of doing this is just start right here and rebuild indexes. Check the box down here at the bottom. It says all files. So it checks everything. Just do all the tables that are there on the screen, and then go over to pack data, check all files. Same thing at the very bottom. Then go over to recalculate balances and check each one of these off. So I'm not going to run this through right now. It could take some time depending on your data set. So for all of you Medisoft users who've been using Medisoft for a long time, I would say if maybe about 5+ years, it could take an average, maybe 10, 15 minutes, depending how much you have in there. Anything less than that might take about 5 minutes or so. So just think about that whenever you're going to run your file maintenance. Probably do it. We'd recommend, good rule of thumb, what do you think, Natasha, about once a week to maybe run file maintenance?
Once a week is good, at the minimal once a month. But once a week is what we recommend. Maybe whoever the last one is to log out on a Friday evening, again, because everybody else has to be logged out when you run this. And usually at the end of the day is best, because then people aren't waiting to get back in it. You can run the file maintenance. So maybe at the end of the week on a Friday evening.
Perfect. Yeah. And that's usually best. Like I said, you have to have everybody out of the program before it even lets you open it up. So that if you're able to coordinate it that way, give it enough time, it's going to give you a message at the very end that it's finished. So don't try to stop it. If it looks like nothing's happening, give it some extra time until you get that message that all checked file processes have been completed. So when you see that little box pop up, then you're good to go. You're to be able to get back to the program. So it's good to run this even if you don't see any error messages, because your database is so big, you may have not even come across an account that could give you an error message. So if you do this consistently, it's going to eliminate the need of or the problem of data corruption, because that's an even bigger problem. If you do see an error message come up while this is running, because that's also possible, it's very rare when that happens, But if you do see an error pop up, it might tell you error like MWTRN or some code that doesn't make any sense. But something like that can tell you that it's a problem in your transaction entry screen. So we have data repair specialists here. If that's ever the case, you can always contact us and we can go in there and see if we can repair the data. But it's going to tell you if it does find a problem that it's not able to fix within file maintenance. But otherwise, it's just going to go in there and do all the cleanup for you and get that taken care of. And that's file maintenance. That's it. Well, actually, the one other tab that you see here that we didn't cover, and there's a reason for this, is because you want to be very, 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 very careful before you run this, and it's called purge data. So we don't recommend doing this as a regular maintenance like you do with file maintenance once a week or once a month. Purge data is exactly what it says. It's purging out all the information. It's eliminating it. It's destroying it. It's making it disappear forever. So that's why it's so important to do that backup of your database, because if you, for some reason, go in here and select it, you can restore your backup if that's not what you intended to do. However, this can be helpful doing purge data if you have been using Medisoft for a very long time and you notice that you have a lot of statements that have been completed and they're just taking up so much of your space. If you go into statement management, you go to claim management and you have hundreds, thousands of claims they've been paid on and they're from so long ago, then you can consider doing this. At least Medisoft lets you put off a cutoff date. So if you were to go here and you want to do a claim purge, remove really old claims, you can check that box and put a cutoff date, like everything up to January of 2015 or whatever is the cutoff date that you put in there.
7
it does
years
make it a
and
little
older.
bit safer. Yeah, something that's very old, right? You want to keep track of that just for auditing purposes. It will stop you from doing this, or it's not going to eliminate or purge anything out until it has a done status or until all those charges have been completed and paid on. So that's for your purging claims or statements. There's also appointment purge for any old appointments. You can do that as well, anything in your office hours program, and closed cases too. So if you're marking out old cases, putting that little check mark inside of closed cases, that is going to remove them as well from your database. So it will literally clear up space in your system if you do a purge. But you see that in capital letters, use this process with care. So make sure you do that backup. That'll be a lifesaver in case you didn't want to do this. So that's your file maintenance. So let me show you now the utility for if you ever need to change your chart number in your system. In Medisoft, it's very difficult for any of you who've ever entered in a chart and saved it and entered in any type of charge into the account or create an appointment, but then you wanted to change that chart number. It's nearly impossible to do that. So if you go here to list patient guarantors and cases, if you were to, let's choose an account here. We're going to go into Susan Brimley's account. And if you try changing the chart number, it's not going to let you. It's going to stop you from doing that. And it's a safeguard because you could get data corruption if you changed it to a chart number that already existed or that it's not in the right format with the amount of characters that it requires. But you might want to do this because let's say your patient gets married and the last name changes. So even if you were to change the name right here, let's say for Susan, she's now going to be Susan Johnson. But if you notice the way it's filtered and sorted here, it's doing it by chart number. Same thing in transaction entry. If you're trying to look up a chart just by clicking the drop-down arrow, it's sorting it by your chart number, and that doesn't change. So that could be a little bit difficult with trying to look up information. So Medisoft has a utility called Power Tools that lets you change the chart number. I'm going to show you that. So now that we changed Susan to Johnson, from Brimley to Johnson, we're going to update that chart number as well. And just like with file maintenance, everybody has to be out of the program on all the computers and make sure you do a backup. And even if you forget to do a backup, that's okay if you didn't do it inside of Medisoft, because when you go and you pull up this utility, it's going to say, have you done a backup? So the way you access this is just by, on your desktop, you're going to right click on your Medisoft icon, and you're going to right click and go to Open File Location. So right click, Open File Location. This is going to open up the folder where you've got all your program files. The one that you're looking for is called Mediutils, short for Medisoft Utilities. Here it is, Mediutils. So once you find it, just double click on it. You're going to select the practice where you're going to be changing the chart number. So in this case, it's our tutorial data. You're going to go down to this field that says Power Tools, towards the middle there, Power Tools, and then click OK. There's that warning message. Can't stress it enough. Make sure you have a backup before you do this. Since we already have our backup, I'm going to continue without a backup. So we're going to look for that chart, and that was Susan Brimley. We changed it to Susan Johnson. So here it is. And all you do is just select, highlight that name. We have Johnson that's highlighted. And you see down here on the bottom left corner, it's already making that suggestion of what that chart number should be or what you can change it to without it causing any problems in your database. And it's putting it in the format of how the other charts are, by having a few letters of the last name, a few letters of the first, and then some numerical digits. So let's go ahead and do that so you can see how this happens. We're going to select, we're going to leave it as new chart, and you can change it if you wanted to. I'd recommend leaving it to what it's displaying just to make sure that it's going to change it to a chart number that works. And then all we have to do is select change. That. You want to update all occurrences of chart number. And that's another point about this, because there's different areas where your chart displays, not just in transaction entries, your claim management, office hours, all the different areas where that chart number exists. It's going to go through the entire database and change that chart number. We're going to say yes to that for a moment, and it's all finished. So it just ran through that process, and then that screen went away. Now we're going to go into Medisoft and take a look. Program. Natasha, remind me to do a file maintenance later.
Okay.
So let's go to list patient guarantors and cases. And Susan Johnson, there she is. So now you see that the chart number has been changed. So that's one instance where you can change the chart number. That's probably a common thing that comes up for a lot of our offices. So that's how you change your chart number. So if you ever need to do that, Mediutils side of Medisoft. All right, Natasha, I think we're ready for our next topic.
Thank you, Tony. And then the last thing we kind of wanted to show you is we get this question a lot. How do you delete insurances that you no longer use or mark them as inactive? So I'm just going to bring up the insurance list, and you can do this again with cases, charts, any of your codes throughout Medisoft. It won't let you delete the insurance code if it's tied to a record within Medisoft, of course, because you don't want to delete an insurance code and then the case is going to be empty and that insurance code won't be in the case anymore. That would not be good. So Medisoft, again, has a safeguard to where if you should try to delete an insurance code that's being used, it's going to tell you, or any code throughout Medisoft, it's going to tell you that this code is currently being used on a record. So what you can do instead to get it off of your list or hide it from your list, if you have duplicates, like this one here, I have 2 different Blue Cross Blue Shields, same address, same payer ID. So I really don't need 2 of them on there. I just need 1. I'm going to double click on it, and there's an inactive box. You're going to put a check mark in, and then just click save, and that's going to hide it from your list. It doesn't delete it, it's there, it's just hidden. If you want to retrieve those items that you have marked as inactive, all you have to do is right click, and you're going to get this drop down menu, and you can select show inactive records, and it'll bring the ones that you've marked inactive on your screen. Now, this is something you do have to turn on in your program options to be able to hide your inactive records, which again, if you want to hide them, you'll just mark hide inactive records, and those are hidden again. So to turn that feature on in program options, you're going to go to File. You're going to go to your program options towards the middle of the dropdown. And it takes a few seconds for program options to load. And right on this first screen that pops up under the General tab, over towards the right-hand side, there's this box that says Hide Inactive and Closed Items. You just want to make sure to have a check mark in that box so you can hide those inactive and closed items. This also is for hiding your closed cases, which is another nice feature to prevent data entry errors from people. So if you're in the transaction entry screen, you don't want your staff to keep adding charges to a case that's been closed out, or a case with old insurance on there. So if I pull up a patient here, let's see, and this patient has 2 different cases, and maybe I want to hide this old one so that they no longer try to send claims to Aetna for charges or enter charges under this old case with this old insurance company. You're just going to right click and edit case. And under the cases, there is a closed case button towards the top middle of the screen. You're just going to put a check mark in that box for, and click save. It will give you a pop-up to confirm if you want to close this case or not. There's 2 different confirmations that pop up. If there's a balance under this case, like if there's charges that still have a balance, it's going to tell you this case does not have a $0 balance. Are you sure you want to close it out? So that way you'll know, hey, maybe I need to go in there and do some old bad debt write-off, use a write-off utility first, and then go in and close the cases. Or, check it out and see why it still has a balance on an old case. And then in this situation, this is already a $0 balance account. So this one is going to ask, well, are you sure you just want to close this case? So I'm just going to hit yes. If you don't want to get that pop up in the future, there's a check mark. A box here you can check mark that says do not show this message again. But I like for it to confirm with me first. And then now if we go back to, I'm going to close this out and go back to transaction entry. And so the next staff that you get that comes in here, when they go to click the drop down for cases, that case is hidden. It's no longer there. So it only gives them the option to enter charges under this current case. So that really does help prevent a lot of data entry errors and charges being billed to the wrong insurance or placed under the wrong case. So that's just another option that we recommend for your data. All right, so that includes today's webinar. Tony, do you have anything else you want to add?
No, we did get a question, and I'll just throw this out there for you, Natasha. I'm wondering if the AR tracker, it's even possible to do this for inactivating patients that haven't been seen for a number of years. One of our attendees asked that question. Inactivating patients. I think from what I know, you have to go into each account, but maybe there's another way. You want to show us?
Unfortunately, there's not. You'd have to go to that specific chart to mark that patient inactive. There's not a utility for that, but that is a great idea to get that added in future versions of Medisoft. That would be great to be able to go and activate all of them at once. But yeah, you'd have to just edit the chart by double clicking on it and then mark that chart inactive to hide that.
So we have somebody in our company that actually sits on the advisory board for the program. So it's something, great suggestion. We can go ahead and run it by them and let the developers know.
Yeah, great suggestion there. Great question. So I inactivated this chart here, and you can see when I right click and I hit show inactive records, it's now showing a red X next to that chart, giving me a list of the ones that are inactive. There's another one towards the middle of the list as well. And then you can just right click again and hit hide, and it'll hide those charts again. So they're always there. You can always access them later if you mark them inactive. Yeah, good question. I don't see any other questions yet, but while you guys are thinking about that, we would like you to visit our website here at ascomp.com. And if you guys are interested in upgrading to version 25, you're on a version, or interested in our promos for version 26, give us a call or visit our website. Also, the next webinar that we're going to be doing is going to be on December 9th, and that's going to be covering year-end reports. So that's going to be a really great one as well. So you can get your totals for the year. You can go in and see what your aging totals are to work your aging reports before the end of the year, and do some cleanup as far as those reports are concerned. So again, this cleanup that we showed you today is really going to help your year-end reports have a better, more accurate balance on them. So this is great to get started on your data cleanup now, so that when you do go to do your year-end reports, they will be accurate. Have any other questions come in?
No, I don't see any come in yet.
All right. And you can register for the additional webinars at ascomp.com/events. It'll take you right to the list of the webinars coming up. We're going to be adding more to this as well. We will be adding a Medisoft version 26 new feature webinar. And we're going to do another webinar for the top 7 best features of the last few versions of Medisoft. So those will be coming up. All right. Again, if you have any questions, you can give us a call. If you need training on anything that we've shown today, if you want one-on-one training, if something wasn't clear, you had additional questions, you can always schedule one-on-one training with us, with Tony or myself, at give us a call at that number there, 877-243-8881, or any pricing questions, you can give us a call there. You can email us or go to our website as well. Other than that, we thank you all for joining us today. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
You all have a great afternoon.